The massive Federation flagship hung in space like a silver mountain. Its hull stretched 4 kilometers, covered in lights that blinked in patterns too complex for human eyes to follow. Inside the ship's central meeting hall, representatives from dozens of alien species waited in perfect silence. Ambassador Kong Wu stepped through the airlock doors, carrying only a small wooden box and wearing a simple black suit. The silence grew even deeper as hundreds of alien eyes turned toward him. Some of those eyes were compound like insects, others glowed with inner fire, and a few seemed to be made of pure energy. The Vorthan delegate spoke first. He was 9 feet, tall with skin like polished metal and voice that sounded like grinding gears. Human representative, state your species classification and military strength. Kong Wu smiled and bowed slightly. My name is Kong Wu. I bring greetings from Earth and all humanity. Before we begin, would anyone like some tea? A ripple of confusion passed through the assembled aliens. The Nexus Collective representative, a being that looked like a floating brain surrounded by tentacles, pulsed with different colors. Tea. What is this tea? Is it a weapon? A drug? No, no. Kong Wu laughed gently. He opened his wooden box and took out a small metal container and some cups. Tea is just hot water with leaves. It helps people think clearly and feel calm. My grandmother always said that important conversations should begin with sharing something warm. The delegate's metal face showed what might have been annoyance. This is highly irregular. Federation First Contact Protocol requires military assessment, technological evaluation, and territorial mapping before any social interaction. I understand, Kong Wu said as he prepared the tea with practiced movements. But I was hoping we could talk like neighbors meeting for the first time. Tell me, do you have families, children? What makes your people happy? The question seemed to shock the aliens even more than the tea offer. Most species in the galaxy followed strict patterns. During negotiations, the strong ones made demands. The weak ones offered tribute. Nobody asked about families. A small, furry creature with 6 legs spoke up. She represented the Harmony Gardens, a peaceful species that grew cities from living plants. I have 3 younglings, she said quietly. They like to climb the singing trees and collect starflowers. Kang Wu's face lit up with genuine interest. That sounds wonderful. I have a daughter too. She's studying to become a doctor. Do your younglings go to school? They learn from the trees themselves. The creature replied, seeming to relax. The old growth whispers knowledge to those who listen. How beautiful, Kong Wu said, pouring tea into small cups. On Earth, we have a saying that the best teachers are often the oldest and wisest. It sounds like your trees are both. The Vorthan delegate made a sound like grinding metal. This is pointless. We need to establish dominance, hierarchies, and resource allocation protocols. Respectfully, Kong Wu said, offering the Vorthan cup of tea. I think we need to establish trust first. How can we make fair agreements if we don't understand each other? Through the great windows of the meeting hall, another ship could be seen approaching. It was much smaller than the Federation flagship, painted white with blue markings. This was the human escort vessel, commanded by Captain Li Na. The Vorthan warships immediately moved to intercept, their weapons charging with visible energy. The standard procedure was to demonstrate superior firepower during first contact meetings. Captain Li Na watched from her bridge as the alien ships surrounded her vessel. Her crew waited for orders, hands ready at weapon controls. Instead, she turned to her communications officer. Open all channels, she said calmly. Begin transmission. What came from the human ship was not a threat or a surrender. It was music. A gentle melody played on traditional Korean instruments, accompanied by mathematical equations that showed the harmonic relationships between the notes. The alien ships stopped their aggressive approach. The music was unlike anything they had heard before, combining emotional expression with precise mathematical beauty. The equations were elegant, showing a deep understanding of universal mathematical principles. On the Federation flagship, the assembled delegates listened to the music in amazement. The Nexus Collective representatives' colors shifted to soft blues and purples, indicating fascination. Even the Vorthan delegate seemed affected, his metal features softening slightly. Your ship sends strange signals, the Vorthan said to Kong Wu. Is this some kind of code? It's just music, Kong Wu replied. Captain Li Na believes that music is a universal language. The mathematical equations show how the harmonies work. We wanted to share something beautiful with you. An elderly delegate from the Crystal Conclave, whose body was made of living gemstone, spoke for the first time. In 3,000 years of Federation history, no species has ever greeted us with art and mathematics combined. Most species show us their weapons or their wealth. You show us your culture. Culture is what makes us who we are, Kong Wu said. Simply, our weapons and wealth are just tools. But our music, our stories, our way of caring for each other, that's what defines humanity. The small furry delegate from the Harmony Gardens moved closer. Your tea smells like the morning flowers. In our oldest gardens, may I try some? Of course, Kong Wu said, handing her a cup. be careful, it's still hot. As more delegates began to accept tea and listen to the music, something unprecedented happened in Federation history. The formal meeting began to feel like a gathering of friends. Aliens who had never spoken to each other started comparing their different cultures. The Vorthan delegate admitted that his people had artists too, though they worked with metal and fire instead of paint and canvas. The Nexus Collective representative shared that their young also asked endless questions, just like human children. The Crystal Conclave delegate explained how their people grew new individuals from song and starlight, which fascinated everyone. For hours, the meeting continued without a single discussion of military strength or territorial claims. Instead, they talked about food and festivals, about how different species raised their young and honored their elders. They learned that the gas-dwelling nebula riders told stories by changing the colors of their entire bodies, and that the machine-like gear assembly had poetry written in the patterns of their mechanical movements. As the day ended, the Federation Council faced an unprecedented situation. Every previous first contact had ended with either the new species joining as subordinates or being rejected as threats. But humanity fit neither category. They were clearly intelligent and technologically capable, as shown by their elegant mathematics and space travel. But they were also genuinely peaceful, more interested in understanding others than in conquering them. They had power, but used it gently, like their music that could fill space without harming anyone. The Vorthan delegate, who had begun the meeting with suspicion, found himself planning to invite human musicians to perform for his people. The Nexus Collective wanted to study human emotional responses to beauty. Even the most cautious delegates were curious about these strange beings who offered tea instead of threats. As the human delegation prepared to leave, Kongwu left behind several containers of tea and a collection of human music. "For your next meetings," he said with a smile. Sometimes the best diplomacy happens when people are comfortable and relaxed. The Federation Council would spend days debating what to do about humanity. They had never encountered a species that seemed genuinely interested in friendship rather than advantage. It was confusing, unprecedented, and somehow deeply appealing, that in the end, they decided to watch and wait. Humanity would be given provisional membership in the Federation, with the understanding that they were still being evaluated. What none of them realized was that the evaluation would go both ways, and that humanity's strange approach to diplomacy would soon change the galaxy forever. 6 months after humanity joined the Federation, war drums were beating across the galaxy. The Prism Collective and the Cloud Speakers had been enemies for 800 years, and now their conflict was about to explode into total war. The Prism Collective lived on crystal worlds where everything was made of living glass. They spoke through light patterns and saw the universe as geometric perfection. Their cities were beautiful towers that caught starlight and turned it into rainbow cascades. The Cloud Speakers floated in the gas layers of giant planets. They had no solid bodies, existing as patterns of wind and electricity. They communicated through atmospheric music, making their entire world sing with complex melodies that could be heard from space. Both species wanted the same star system. It contained unique energy crystals that the Prism Collective needed for their cities, and rare gas clouds that the Cloud Speakers required for reproduction. For centuries they had fought over these resources, with neither side willing to compromise. Federation had tried to mediate 17 times. Each attempt followed the same pattern. Military advisors would draw up territorial divisions. Economic experts would calculate resource sharing. Legal scholars would cite ancient treaties. Every solution failed because both species rejected any plan that gave their enemies an advantage. Now the situation was critical. Both sides had assembled their largest war fleets in centuries. The Prism Collective had weapons that could turn entire planets into glass, while the Cloud Speakers could create storms that would destroy solar systems. If they fought, millions would die. The Federation Council met in emergency session. The Vorthan delegate pounded his metal fist on the table. "We must choose a side and enforce peace through strength. Let the stronger species claim the system." The Nexus Collective representative pulsed with worried colors. "Military intervention will only make them fight harder. We should seal off the system and forbid both species from entering." The elderly Crystal Conclave delegate shook her gemstone head. 800 years of hatred cannot be solved with force or barriers. Perhaps it is time to try something different. All eyes turned to the human delegation. Diplomat Park Jin stood up slowly. He was a quiet man in his 50s, with gentle eyes and hands that moved expressively when he spoke. Next to him sat his assistant, engineer Cho Min, a young woman who rarely spoke but watched everything with sharp intelligence. "Honored delegates," Park Jin said softly, "I request permission to attempt mediation, but I will need time and freedom to work without interference." The Vorthan delegate laughed, a sound like grinding gears. "Human, 17 teams of experts have failed. What makes you think you can succeed where they could not?" "Because," Park Jin replied, "we want to try a different approach. Instead of focusing on what divides them, we want to understand what connects them." The Federation Council was skeptical, but they were also desperate. With no other options, they gave Park Jin 6 weeks to prevent a war that could tear apart their corner of the galaxy. Park Jin and Cho Min traveled first to Lumina Prime, the capital world of the Prism Collective. The planet was breathtaking, covered in crystal forests that sang with light. The buildings grew like flowers, each one unique and perfect. The Prism Collective leaders met them in a chamber made of pure white crystal. The beings themselves looked like walking diamonds, their bodies reflecting and refracting light in patterns too complex for human eyes to fully process. Humans, the Prism speaker said, their voice like crystal bells. We agreed to this meeting out of respect for Federation. But understand that the Cloud Speakers are chaos incarnate. They cannot be reasoned with or trusted. Park Jin nodded respectfully. Tell me about your people. How did the Prism Collective begin? The question surprised them. Previous mediators had immediately started discussing territorial boundaries and resource allocation, but Park Jin seemed genuinely interested in their history. We were born from the first light of creation, the Prism speaker explained, their form glowing brighter with pride. When the universe was young and dark, our ancestors captured the very first rays of starlight and made them solid. We are order, given form, beauty made eternal. That's wonderful, Park Jin said, and his admiration was clearly genuine. Your cities are the most beautiful I've ever seen. The way you use light as both art and architecture is amazing. While Park Jin learned about Prism history, Cho Min studied their technology and culture. She noticed that every Prism creation had mathematical perfection built into it. Their music was based on geometric sequences, their art followed golden ratios, and even their language used light patterns that created perfect fractals. After a week on Lumina Prime, they traveled to Tempest, the home world of the Cloud Speakers. The planet had no solid surface, just layers of colored gas that swirled in eternal storms. The Cloud Speakers themselves appeared as vague shapes in the mist, visible only when lightning illuminated their forms. Welcome, solid ones, the Cloud Speaker said, their voice carried on winds that smelled of ozone and rain. We speak with you because the Federation asks, but know that the Prism Collective are rigid tyrants who would trap all beauty in glass cages again. Park Jin asked about their origins instead of jumping into negotiations. How did your people come to be? The Cloud Speaker's form shifted, becoming more defined as they spoke with passion. We were born from the breath of dying stars. When ancient suns collapsed, their final songs became our first ancestors. We are freedom itself, creativity unbound, the eternal dance of possibility. Park Jin was fascinated. Your world songs are incredible. The harmonies I heard when we arrived moved me to tears. How do you compose such complex music? For days, Park Jin and Cho Min learned about Cloud Speaker culture. Cho Min discovered that their seemingly chaotic music actually followed sophisticated mathematical principles based on fluid dynamics and atmospheric physics. Their art was improvisation elevated to cosmic levels. With each performance, unique and NREPEATABLE. As the weeks passed, Park Jin noticed something that all previous mediators had missed. Both species described themselves as children of cosmic forces, born when the universe was young. Both had creation myths involving the transformation of stellar energy into conscious life. Both valued beauty above all else, though they expressed it differently. More importantly, Cho Min's analysis revealed something stunning. The mathematical principles underlying prism crystal growth and Cloud Speaker atmospheric music were related. Both species were unconsciously following the same universal patterns. The hidden mathematics that governed how energy became matter and matter became life. With only 1 week left before the war deadline, Park Jin made a proposal that shocked both species. Instead of negotiating over territory, he suggested they create something together. You are both artists, he told them during a joint communication session. The Prism Collective creates eternal beauty in crystal and light. The Cloud Speakers create ever-changing beauty in wind and song. What if you combined your arts? The idea seemed impossible. How could beings of solid crystal work with creatures of gas and storm? But Park Jin had studied both cultures carefully, and Cho Min had designed the technical solution. They proposed a joint art project in the disputed star system. The Prism Collective would grow crystal formations in space, structures that would catch and focus the system's unique energy. The Cloud Speakers would create controlled atmospheric effects around the crystals, using the rare gases they needed for reproduction. The result would be a cosmic artwork visible from light years away, a combination of crystal perfection and atmospheric chaos that would create beauty neither species could achieve alone. Both sides initially rejected the idea. The Prism Collective called it contamination of their pure art. The Cloud Speakers said it would cage their free expression. But Park Jin persisted, showing them mathematical models of how their combined arts could create something unprecedented. The breakthrough came when Cho Min presented her analysis of their creation myths, using advanced translation matrices that captured emotional and cultural meanings, not just literal words. She showed both species that they were telling the same story from different perspectives. Both myths described the universe beginning in darkness and chaos, then consciousness, emerging to bring order and beauty. The Prism Collective emphasized the order aspect, while the Cloud Speakers focused on the creative chaos. But they were describing the same cosmic event. For the first time in 800 years, representatives from both species fell silent. In that silence, they began to see each other not as enemies, but as complementary aspects of the same truth. The first joint artwork was small, just a single crystal structure surrounded by controlled atmospheric effects. But when the light of the system's star hit the crystal and refracted through the cloud speaker gases, something magical happened. The result was a constantly changing light show that combined geometric perfection with flowing improvisation. The crystals provided structure while the gases added movement and color. Together, they created patterns that neither species had imagined possible. Word of the collaboration spread quickly through both cultures. Artists from both species began volunteering to work on larger projects. Within months, the disputed star system became a pilgrimage site, filled with crystalline cloud artworks that celebrated the beauty of cooperation. The peace treaty was signed, not in a government building, but floating in space, surrounded by their joint creations. For the first time in Federation history, two enemy species had become allies through understanding and shared creativity rather than exhaustion or conquest. The galaxy watched in amazement as the impossible became reality. The human approach to diplomacy, focusing on cultural connection rather than political advantage, had achieved what centuries of traditional mediation could not. As news of the mediation miracle spread, requests for human diplomatic services began flooding in from across the galaxy. Park Jin and Cho Min found themselves pioneers of a new kind of peace, one built on the recognition that even the most different species might share common dreams. Dr. Kim So stood in her laboratory on the Federation Research Station, staring at brain scans that should have been impossible. The neural patterns floating in holographic displays showed something that challenged everything the galaxy knew about consciousness and emotion. She was a neuroscientist who had spent 20 years studying how different species think and feel. Her research had always followed the accepted rule that empathy was limited by biology. Mammals could understand other mammals. Energy beings could connect with similar energy patterns. But crossing species barriers was considered scientifically impossible. The human brain scans proved that rule wrong. When Ambassador Kong Wu had shared tea with the alien delegates, his neural activity had shown something extraordinary. His mirror neurons, the brain cells responsible for empathy and understanding others, had activated in patterns that matched several different alien species at once. When Park Jin had listened to the Prism Collective's creation stories, his emotional centers had literally synchronized with crystalline thought patterns. When he heard the cloud speaker's atmospheric music, his brain had adapted to process chaotic harmonies as if they were familiar melodies. It's not just cultural adaptation, Dr. Kim So explained to her research team. Human brains are actually changing their structure to understand alien emotions. We're experiencing genuine empathy across species barriers. Her assistant, Dr. Han Gil, looked at the data with amazement. The neuroplasticity readings are off the charts. It's like human brains treat every sentient species as a variation of humanity rather than as foreign beings. This discovery came at a critical time. The galaxy was facing a trade crisis that threatened to collapse the economy of 17 star systems. The Spiral Federation, master merchants who lived on space stations between the stars, had stopped trading with the ring worlds, mining planets rich in rare metals. The dispute had started over pricing agreements but had grown into something much deeper. The Spiral Federation believed in free trade and competitive markets. They saw business as a game where the smartest traders won the biggest profits. The ringworlds valued community cooperation and fair distribution of resources. They thought the Spiral Federation's competitive approach was greedy and destructive. Traditional Federation arbitration had been trying to solve the dispute for months. Economic advisors calculated profit margins. Legal experts studied trade regulations. Mathematical models predicted market fluctuations. But every proposed solution satisfied neither side. The Spiral Federation wanted complete freedom to set prices based on supply and demand. The ringworlds insisted on fixed prices that ensured fair wages for their miners. The two approaches were fundamentally incompatible. Into this deadlock came negotiator Yuan Te, a middle-aged human who had once been a social worker before joining the diplomatic corps. Unlike other mediators who worked from conference rooms and data reports, Yuan Te made an unusual request. "I want to live with both peoples for 2 weeks each," he told the Federation Council. "I need to understand how they really live, not just how they negotiate." The request was almost unheard of. Diplomats were supposed to remain neutral and professional. Living with the parties in a dispute was considered too personal and potentially biasing. But the success of Park Jin's cultural approach had earned humans credibility. The council agreed to let Yunte try his unconventional method. Yuntei first traveled to Merchant's Haven, the largest Spiral Federation trading station. The station was a masterpiece of engineering, a city built from connected spacecraft that moved constantly through space, following the best trade routes. The Spiral Federation people were tall and thin, adapted for life in low gravity. Their skin had a slight metallic sheen, and their eyes could process market data streams that appeared as floating text around them. They moved with quick, efficient gestures, always calculating the next deal. "Welcome, human trader," said Vel Kosa, the station's primary merchant. "Time is profit, so let's make this efficient. What do you want to buy or sell?" "Actually," Yuntei said, "I want to learn how you live. May I work alongside your people for a few days?" Velkorsa looked confused. "Work? You mean labor, without profit calculation? I want to understand your daily life. What makes you happy? What are your concerns? How do you raise your children?" For the next 2 weeks, Yuntei worked in the trading stations, learning how Spiral Federation society functioned. He discovered that their competitive approach wasn't based on greed, but on a deep cultural belief that competition brought out the best in people. Spiral Federation children learned math by playing trading games. They celebrated individuals who found clever solutions to economic problems. Their greatest heroes were merchants who had created prosperity for entire communities through innovative business practices. But Yuntei also saw the stress their system created. Many Spiral Federation people worked constantly, afraid of falling behind in the competitive economy. Some families rarely saw each other because parents spent all their time chasing better deals. After living with the Spiral Federation, Yuntei traveled to Ironhold, the capital of the Ringworlds. The planet was covered in vast mining operations, but they were nothing like the ugly industrial sites found on some worlds. The Ringworlds had developed mining as an art form, creating beautiful terraced landscapes that provided resources while maintaining ecological balance. The Ringworld people were short and stocky, with skin that had a subtle crystalline pattern from generations of working with rare metals. They moved with deliberate, careful precision, and their eyes could see tiny flaws in metal structures that other species would miss. "Welcome, friend from space," said Orkeeper Shanboro, the elected leader of Ironhold's mining communities. "We offer you food and shelter freely, as we do for all guests." The Ringworld culture was built around cooperation and mutual support. Children learned by working alongside adults in community projects. They celebrated groups that had overcome challenges together. Their heroes were individuals who had sacrificed personal gain to help their communities. But Yuntei also saw the limitations of their system. Innovation was slow because all decisions required community consensus. Some talented individuals felt frustrated by the pressure to always put group needs ahead of personal ambitions. As Yuntei lived and worked with both peoples, something remarkable happened in his brain. Dr. Kim So monitored his neural activity from a distance, watching as his empathy centers activated in ways that matched both cultures simultaneously. When he was with the Spiral Federation, his brain processed their rapid-fire business decisions as natural and logical. When he was with the Ringworlds, their consensus building felt equally natural and right. Most amazingly, he could feel the emotional truth behind both approaches. The Spiral Federation's competition came from a genuine desire to create prosperity and reward innovation. The Ringworld's cooperation came from an equally genuine desire to ensure no one was left behind and everyone had enough. After a month of living with both cultures, Yuntei understood something that had escaped all previous mediators. The dispute wasn't really about economics. It was about two different definitions of fairness. The Spiral Federation believed fairness meant everyone having equal opportunity to succeed through their own efforts. The Ringworlds believed fairness meant everyone having equal access to what they needed to live well. Both definitions were morally valid, but they led to completely different economic systems. Armed with this understanding, Yuntei proposed a solution that surprised everyone. Instead of trying to make both sides use the same system, he suggested they create a hybrid approach that honored both definitions of fairness. The new trade agreement included competitive pricing for luxury goods and innovations, satisfying the Spiral Federation's belief in rewarding excellence. But it also included fixed fair prices for essential resources like food, medicine, and basic shelter materials, satisfying the Ringworld's belief in ensuring everyone's basic needs. More importantly, the agreement included cultural exchange programs. Young Spiral Federation traders would spend time in Ringworld communities, learning about cooperation and long-term thinking. Young Ringworld people would visit trading stations, learning about innovation and individual initiative. The solution worked because it recognized that both cultures had valuable wisdom to offer. The Spiral Federation's competitive drive spurred innovation and efficiency. The Ringworld's cooperative approach ensured stability and community care. When the trade agreement was signed, representatives from both cultures did something unprecedented. They thanked not just Yuntei, but each other, acknowledging that the negotiations had taught them new ways to think about fairness and prosperity. Back in her laboratory, Dr. Kim So analyzed the neural data from Yuantei's mission. The patterns were clear and consistent with what she had observed in other human diplomats. When humans genuinely tried to understand alien perspectives, their brains literally adapted to process alien emotional patterns as familiar and comprehensible. "We're not just good at diplomacy," she explained to the Federation Science Council. "We're biologically designed for it. Human empathy isn't limited by species barriers because we don't see other species as truly alien. We see them as different expressions of universal consciousness." The implications were staggering. If humans could feel genuine empathy for any sentient species, they could understand motivations and emotions that other species found completely incomprehensible. But Dr. Kim So's research also revealed something troubling. Not all species reacted positively to human empathy. The brain scans showed that some aliens found human emotional adaptability threatening rather than helpful. Among these were the Fang dynasty, a predatory species that had built their civilization on dominance hierarchies and competitive aggression. Early reports suggested that Fang dynasty leaders saw human empathy as a dangerous weakness that could undermine their entire social structure. As news of human emotional capabilities spread through the galaxy, reactions were mixed. Many species were fascinated and wanted to learn more about human diplomatic methods, but others began to worry about what this meant for the balance of power in the galaxy. For the first time since joining the Federation, humans faced the possibility that their unique abilities might make them enemies rather than friends. The very empathy that made them successful diplomats could also make them targets for species that saw emotional understanding as a threat to their way of life. Dr. Kim So filed her research reports with growing concern. Humanity's gift for understanding others was transforming galactic diplomacy, but it was also creating new dangers that no human had anticipated. The message arrived at Federation headquarters as pure mathematics written in quantum fluctuations. It took the best translation computers 3 days to decode even the basic meaning. The ancient Void Consortium, rulers of dark matter technology, and masters of space-time manipulation, were requesting a meeting with humanity. For millions of years, the Void Consortium had remained separate from galactic politics. They existed partially outside normal reality, living in pocket dimensions where thought became matter and time moved in circles. Most species considered them myths or legends, beings too advanced and alien for meaningful contact. The Federation Council gathered in emergency session. The Vorthan delegate's metal face showed visible worry. The Void Consortium has never contacted anyone directly. If they want to speak with humans specifically, it means something important is happening. The Nexus Collective representative pulsed. "With nervous colors, our records show only 3 previous contacts with the Void Consortium in all of galactic history. Each time, they appeared to warn about cosmic-level threats. Ambassador Song Jun volunteered for the mission before anyone else could speak. He was the youngest member of the Human Diplomatic Corps, barely 30 years old, with black hair and eyes that seemed to see deeper than most people looked. "I'll go," he said simply. "If they specifically asked for humans, then they must believe we can understand something that other species cannot." The Federation's top scientists tried to prepare him. Dr. Kim So worked with quantum physicists to modify his neural interfaces, allowing his brain to process information in ways that approached Void Consortium perception. Dr. Lim Ha, a brilliant mathematician, developed new frameworks for understanding multidimensional concepts. Remember, Dr. Lim Ha warned him, the Void Consortium doesn't think in linear time like we do. Past, present, and future are all equally real to them. They might talk about events that haven't happened yet, as if they already occurred. Their communication is based on quantum probability. Dr. Kim So added, "Every word they speak exists in multiple states until you observe it. Your brain will have to choose which version of their message to experience." The meeting was arranged in a pocket dimension created specifically for the encounter. Song Jun traveled there in a specially modified ship that could phase partially out of normal space. With him went Dr. Lim Ha, whose mathematical mind was needed to translate concepts that had no equivalent in any known language. The pocket dimension was unlike anything in the normal universe. Space curved in impossible directions. Colors existed that had no names because no living being had ever seen them before. Geometric shapes folded through dimensions that human minds could barely comprehend. The Void Consortium appeared as shifting patterns of dark energy, their forms constantly changing between solid matter and pure thought. When they spoke, their words came not as sound, but as direct alterations to the fabric of reality. "Humans," the voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "We have observed your recent activities with interest. Your species displays properties that we had not calculated." Song Jun felt his modified brain struggling to process the communication. Each word existed in multiple probability states, and he had to consciously choose which meaning to accept. "Honored Void Consortium, we are grateful for this meeting. We hope to learn from your ancient wisdom. Wisdom is a limited concept. the void entity replied. We exist across all possible timelines simultaneously. We see what was, what is, and what might be as a single unified pattern. Your species introduces variables we did not expect. Dr. Limha worked frantically to record and translate the conversation. Her instruments could barely detect the quantum fluctuations that carried meaning, and the mathematics involved required calculations in 11 dimensions. You speak of unexpected variables, Songjun said carefully. What have you observed about humanity that surprises you? The Void Consortium's form shifted, becoming more solid and defined. In most timeline probabilities, organic species follow predictable patterns. They compete, dominate, or submit. They create hierarchies based on strength, intelligence, or resource control. But humans consistently choose cooperation over domination, understanding over conquest. That's our nature, Songjun replied. We believe that working together makes everyone stronger. Nature is another limited concept, the entity said. What you call nature, we observe as conscious choice repeated across multiple probability streams. Your species actively selects empathy when survival logic suggests aggression. Dr. Lim Ha's equipment began registering massive quantum fluctuations. The Void Consortium was accessing information from timelines that didn't exist yet, pulling knowledge from possible futures into the present moment. We must share why we requested this meeting, the entity continued. In approximately 7 years and 4 months of your linear time, an ancient cycle will complete. The Devourers will return. Songjun felt a chill that had nothing to do with the strange physics of the pocket dimension. The Devourers, what are they? Beings that exist in the spaces between galaxies, the Void Consortium explained. Every million years, they enter this galaxy and consume entire civilizations. They feed not just on matter and energy, but on the life force of sentient beings. When they finish, nothing remains but empty space. The revelation was staggering. Dr. Limha's instruments recorded massive reality distortions as the Void Consortium shared images from previous cycles, entire star systems being drained of life, brilliant civilizations reduced to cosmic dust, the galaxy stripped bare and left dead for thousands of years. Why hasn't anyone in the Federation heard of this? Songjun asked. Because the consume memory along with everything else, the entity replied. After each cycle, the galaxy repopulates with new species who have no knowledge of what came before. Only we remember, because we exist partially outside the timeline they affect. How many times has this happened? Dr. Limha whispered. This will be the 47th cycle since we began observing. The Void Consortium answered. Each time, the galaxy's species respond in the same patterns. The strong prepare for war. The weak seek places to hide. The intelligent build weapons or shields. All these approaches fail. Songchun's enhanced brain struggled to process the implications. If traditional responses don't work, what does the void entity's form became more complex, folding through dimensions and patterns that hurt to look at directly. The Devourers feed on conflict and competition. The more species fight, whether against them or each other, the stronger they become. War makes them grow. Fear gives them power. Hatred feeds their hunger. Then how do we stop them? Songjun asked. That is what we hoped your species might determine, the Void Consortium replied. In all our observations across multiple timelines, only humans consistently choose unity over division. If any species might find a solution that breaks the cycle, it would be yours. The meeting continued for what felt like hours. Though time had no meaning in the pocket dimension, the Void Consortium shared detailed information about the Devourers' approach patterns, their feeding methods, and the exact timeline of their arrival. Most importantly, they revealed that the Devourers could sense the emotional state of the galaxy from vast distances. Worlds at war appeared bright and appetizing to them. Peaceful civilizations were harder for them to detect and less nourishing when consumed. The previous cycles failed because species united only in fear and desperation, the entity explained. Fear-based unity still generates the conflict energy that feeds the Devourers. True unity, based on genuine understanding and cooperation, might be invisible to them. As the meeting ended, Songjun felt the weight of cosmic responsibility settling on his shoulders. Why are you telling us this? Why not warn the entire galaxy? Because premature warnings always create the panic and conflict that dooms all attempts at defense. The Void Consortium replied. The knowledge must spread gradually, through understanding rather than fear. Your species has shown the ability to unite others through empathy rather than terror. The pocket dimension began to collapse as the Void Consortium prepared to return to their higher dimensional existence. Their final words carried across multiple probability streams simultaneously. Remember, human Songjun, the Devourers arrive in 7 years. Traditional weapons cannot stop them. Traditional unity will only feed them. If the galaxy is to survive this cycle, it must achieve something that has never existed before. Genuine cooperation based on understanding rather than mutual fear. Songjun and Dr. Limha returned to normal space with heads full of impossible knowledge and hearts heavy with cosmic responsibility. They now knew that humanity's gift for diplomatic unity wasn't just changing galactic politics, it might be the only thing that could save every living being in the galaxy from complete annihilation. The question was whether 7 years would be enough time to teach an entire galaxy how to love instead of fight, especially when many species saw human empathy as a threat to their way of life. That as their ship headed back to Federation space, Song Jun stared out at the stars and wondered if the gift that made humans special would prove to be enough to break a cycle of destruction that had repeated for millions of years. The Federation Council chamber had never been so tense. Ambassador Song Jun stood at the center, surrounded by delegates from hundreds of species, all staring at him with expressions ranging from disbelief to terror. The information he had brought back from the Void Consortium was almost too massive to comprehend. 7 years, the elderly Crystal Conclave delegate whispered, her gemstone body flickering with worried light patterns. The Devourers return in 7 years, and nothing we've ever tried has worked. The Vorthon delegate's metal fists clenched and unclenched repeatedly. This is impossible. Our military records go back 50,000 years. There is no mention of any galactic-level threat called the Devourers, because they consume memory along with everything else. Songjun explained again. The Void Consortium showed us images from previous cycles. Entire civilizations wiped out so completely that even their history vanishes. Dr. Limha stepped forward, her hands shaking as she displayed the mathematical models they had recorded. The quantum calculations are consistent. The pattern repeats exactly every million years. We're seeing the mathematical signature of something approaching from intergalactic space right now. The Nexus Collective representative pulsed through rapid color changes, indicating extreme agitation. If this is true, why hasn't our deep space monitoring detected anything? Because they exist partially outside normal spacetime, Songjun replied. They're moving through dimensions we can barely perceive. By the time our instruments detect them, they'll already be here. General Biksu, the highest-ranking human military officer in Federation service, studied the Void Consortium data with growing alarm. She was a woman in her 50s who had spent decades studying warfare across the galaxy. Her analytical mind was already processing tactical implications. Show me the historical patterns again, she requested. How did previous civilizations try to defend themselves? Dr. Limha activated the holographic displays, showing the ghostly images the Void Consortium had shared. Massive space fleets assembling for final battles. Entire planets converted into fortresses. Weapons capable of destroying solar systems, being fired uselessly at enemies that fed on the very conflict those weapons represented. Every cycle follows the same pattern, Songjun explained. The strong species gather their fleets and prepare for war. The defensive species build shields and barriers. The scientific species create superweapons, but fighting the Devourers only makes them stronger. Strategist Oda General Beek, Su's chief advisor, was a young woman with an extraordinary gift, foreseeing patterns in complex situations. As she studied the historical data, her expression grew increasingly troubled. General, she said quietly, look at the energy readings from those battles. Every time a weapon fires at the their power levels increase. Every time fleets engage them in combat, they grow larger. They're literally feeding on the aggression directed against them. The implications were horrifying. Everything the galaxy knew about defense was not just useless against the Devourers, it was actively helpful to them. The more species fought, the stronger their enemies became. The Fang Dynasty delegate, a massive predator with scales like black metal and eyes like burning coals, snarled his response. This is obviously a human trick. They want us to abandon our defenses so they can dominate the galaxy with their weak empathy nonsense. Several other delegates murmured agreement. The idea that aggression and strength were useless went against everything many species believed about survival and power. Think about it logically. The Fang Dynasty delegate continued. These humans claim that fighting makes our enemies stronger, so we should all become peaceful and cooperative. How convenient for a species that specializes in manipulation through false friendship. Ambassador Kongwu, now elderly but still sharp, stood to address the chamber. Honored delegates, I understand your suspicion. What we're proposing goes against millions of years of evolutionary instinct. But consider our track record. Human diplomacy has solved conflicts that traditional methods could not touch. Conflicts between civilized species. The Fang Dynasty delegates shot back. These Devourers are not civilized. They are predators, and predators only understand strength. You're asking us to disarm ourselves against the greatest threat in galactic history. The debate continued for hours. Military leaders insisted that some form of armed resistance was necessary. Scientists argued for technological solutions, like dimensional barriers or reality anchors. Even the most peaceful species found it hard to accept that their traditional methods of avoiding conflict might not work. General Biksu and Oda worked through the night, analyzing every piece of data from the Void Consortium. They studied energy patterns, mathematical models, and the scattered records of civilizations that had faced similar cosmic threats in other galaxies. The pattern is consistent across all the data, Oda reported to the emergency session the next day. Every attempt at violent resistance increases the Devourer's power exponentially. But there's something else in the mathematics. She activated new displays showing complex energy flow diagrams. The Devourers seem to have difficulty detecting or feeding on certain types of consciousness patterns. Specifically, they struggle with minds that are genuinely united in cooperative purpose rather than bound together by fear or necessity. What does that mean in practical terms? Asked the Harmony Gardens delegate, her furry form trembling with worry. It means, General Biksu said slowly, that the galaxy would need to achieve something that has never existed before. Not just a military alliance based on mutual defense, but genuine unity based on understanding and shared purpose. The silence that followed was profound. The idea seemed impossible. The galaxy contained thousands of species with completely different biologies, psychologies, and cultural values. Many had been enemies for millennia. The thought of uniting them all, in genuine cooperation, was overwhelming. How could such unity possibly be achieved? The Spiral Federation delegate asked. Our species can barely cooperate in trade negotiations. True unity across thousands of species is a fantasy. Ambassador Song Jun stepped forward. Actually, we have a proposal, but it will require the galaxy to trust humanity in ways that many of you may find uncomfortable. The proposal was radical beyond anything previously attempted in galactic history. Instead of forming military alliances or trade partnerships, the human diplomatic corps would spread across the galaxy, attempting to heal ancient conflicts and create genuine understanding between species. We would need teams on every major world, Song Jun explained, not to negotiate treaties or trade agreements, but to help species see each other as fellow conscious beings rather than competitors or threats. And how exactly would you accomplish this miracle? The Fang Dynasty delegate sneered. The same way we've approached every other diplomatic challenge, Kangwu replied, by listening to each species' stories, understanding their fears and hopes, and helping them see what they share with their supposed enemies. Dr. Kim So presented her research on human empathic abilities. Our neural patterns allow us to genuinely understand alien emotional states. We can feel what other species feel, which lets us build bridges between minds that have never truly communicated. The Federation Council was split. Progressive species like the Harmony Gardens and Crystal Conclave supported the human approach. Military species like the Vorthan Empire wanted to try technological or strategic solutions first. Predatory species like the Fang Dynasty rejected the entire premise. You're asking us to abandon everything our ancestors learned about survival, the Fang Dynasty delegate declared. Our species has thrived for millions of years by being strong, by dominating our enemies. Now you want us to trust them instead. We're asking you to evolve. Oda replied quietly. The threats your ancestors faced were local and temporary. This threat is cosmic and permanent. The old solutions don't work because the rules have changed. As the debates continued, deep space monitoring stations began detecting the first faint signals of something massive approaching from the void between galaxies. The mathematical predictions were proving accurate. The Devourers were coming, and they were still 6.5 years away. The Federation faced an impossible choice. They could follow their instincts and prepare for war, knowing that such preparations would only feed their enemies. They could try to hide, knowing that fear-based unity would still generate the conflict energy the Devourers consumed, or they could trust humanity's unprecedented approach and attempt, something that had never been achieved in galactic history. Genuine cooperation based on understanding rather than necessity. The vote was scheduled for the following week. As delegates returned to their home worlds to consult with their governments, the galaxy held its breath. The decision they made would determine not just the fate of their current civilizations, but whether conscious life would continue to exist in their corner of the universe. In her laboratory, Dr. Kim So worked frantically to understand exactly how human empathy functioned across species barriers. If the galaxy was going to trust humanity to unite them, she needed to understand the science behind their diplomatic gifts. What she discovered would either save the galaxy or doom it completely. The vote was closer than anyone had expected. By a margin of just 3%, the Federation Council approved humanity's radical plan to unite the galaxy through understanding rather than force. But approval was only the beginning of an impossible task. Within days of the vote, human diplomatic teams were departing for the most dangerous assignments in galactic history. They weren't going to negotiate trade deals or territorial boundaries. They were going to heal wounds that had festered for millennia and create bonds between species that had never seen each other as anything but enemies. Negotiator Anbo received the most challenging assignment of all. She was tasked with ending the blood feud between the Razor Clans and the Shield Brotherhood, two warrior species that had been locked in ritual combat for over 3,000 years. The Razor Clans, were descendants of predators who valued honor above life itself. They had crystalline exoskeletons that could cut through any known material, and they considered dying in combat the highest form of art. Their entire culture was built around the concept that strength proved worth. The shield brotherhood had evolved from prey species that learned to fight back. They carried massive defensive barriers that could stop any attack, and their greatest heroes were those who protected others at the cost of their own lives. They believed that sacrifice for the community was the ultimate virtue. For 3 millennia, these two species had fought ritualized wars that served as both military training and religious ceremony. Neither side sought total victory because the conflict itself had become sacred to both cultures. "This is insane," Unveiled muttered as her ship approached the neutral zone, where the endless war was fought. "I'm supposed to convince two species to give up their most fundamental cultural practice with just 6 years before the galaxy ends." Her assistant was cultural specialist Zhang Mi, a young woman who had spent years studying warrior societies across the galaxy. She had requested this assignment specifically because she believed she understood something about combat cultures that other diplomats missed. "The war isn't really about territory or resources," Zhang Mi explained as they reviewed their research. "Both species describe their combat in spiritual terms. They're not fighting each other so much as fighting against the concept of meaninglessness." "What do you mean?" Unveiled asked. "Look at their mythologies," Zhang Mi said, displaying cultural texts on the ship's screens. "Both species have creation stories about emerging from cosmic chaos into ordered existence. They use combat as a way to prove that conscious will can impose meaning on a meaningless universe." The insight was brilliant. If both species used war to create meaning, then ending the war wouldn't work unless they found another source of meaning to replace it. Their first meeting took place on the traditional battlefield, a barren asteroid where the two species had been fighting for centuries. The ground was covered in the remnants of ancient battles, crystalline shards from Razor Clan exoskeletons mixed with fragments of Shield Brotherhood barriers. The Razor Clan champion, Cutting Edge Supreme, stood 8 feet tall, with a body like living diamond. His voice sounded like crystal wind chimes being struck by lightning. "Human mediator, we have agreed to this meeting only because the Federation demands it. But know that our war is sacred. It cannot be ended by treaty or negotiation." The Shield Brotherhood champion, Barrier Eternal, was equally impressive. Her massive form was covered in interlocking plates that shimmered with defensive energy fields. When she spoke, her voice was like distant thunder. "The human speaks for a species that has never known true honor through combat. What wisdom can such soft creatures offer to warriors?" Instead of arguing with them, Unveiled did something unexpected. She asked them to show her their war. "I want to understand what you're fighting for," she said. "Not the political reasons or the historical grievances, but the spiritual meaning you find in combat." For the next week, Unveiled and Zhang Mi observed the ritualized battles between the two species. What they saw was not mindless violence, but something closer to a deadly dance. Every move had meaning. Every strike and block was performed with artistic precision. The Razor Clans attacked with flowing grace, their crystalline bodies refracting light in patterns that were beautiful even as they were lethal. They fought as if each combat was a symphony, written in motion and light. The Shield Brotherhood defended with absolute dedication, their barriers forming geometric patterns that protected not just themselves but abstract concepts like justice and sacrifice. They fought as if each battle was a prayer made manifest through action. "It's not war," Zhang Mi whispered as they watched a particularly elegant exchange between champions. "It's collaborative art. They're creating meaning together through the structure of their conflict." Unveiled felt her enhanced human empathy reaching out to both species simultaneously. She could feel the Razor Clan's fierce joy in perfect expression of will through action. She could sense the Shield Brotherhood's deep satisfaction in protecting something valuable through sacrifice. Both emotions were pure and beautiful, even though they were expressed through violence. "What if," Unveiled said, "during their next meeting, your two species could create the same meaning without actually hurting each other?" The suggestion horrified both champions. "Combat without consequence is meaningless," Cutting Edge Supreme declared. "Art without risk is not art. Sacrifice without real danger is just pretense." Barrier Eternal agreed. "Honor must be earned through genuine peril." But Zhang Mi had been studying the mathematical patterns underlying their combat forms. What if the danger was real, but the enemy was different? She showed them her analysis of their fighting styles. The Razor Clan's attacks followed complex mathematical sequences that created fractal patterns in space-time. The Shield Brotherhood's defenses generated harmonic resonances that could stabilize quantum fluctuations. "Your combat forms don't just create meaning for your souls," Zhang Mi explained. "They create actual changes in the fundamental structure of reality. Your warriors fighting against cosmic entropy itself." The revelation stunned both species. Their ancient war wasn't just ritual combat, It was a form of reality engineering that helped maintain the stability of local spacetime. The Devourers exist partially outside normal physics. On Bo added, they feed on conflict between conscious beings, but they're weakened by consciousness that actively maintains universal order. Your combat forms could be the perfect weapon. Against them, if you were fighting together instead of against each other, the proposal was radical. Instead of ending their war, the two species would redirect it. They would fight together against the ultimate enemy, using their combined combat forms to create reality effects that could help protect the galaxy. It took months of careful negotiation to work out the details. The Razor clans had to learn to see the Shield Brotherhood not as enemies to be cut down, but as partners in a cosmic dance. The Shield Brotherhood had to adapt their protective instincts to guard something larger than their own communities. The first joint exercises were awkward and dangerous. Millennia of combat instincts don't change overnight, but gradually, something beautiful began to emerge. The Razor clans, fluid attacks combined with the Shield Brotherhood's geometric defenses, created combat forms that were more elegant and powerful than either species had achieved alone. Their joint exercises generated reality-stabilizing effects that could be measured from light years away. More importantly, both species found that fighting together provided even deeper meaning than fighting against each other. They were no longer just proving their individual worth through combat. They were actively participating in the maintenance of cosmic order. News of the successful integration spread across the galaxy, inspiring hope that humanity's approach might actually work. But it also created new problems. The Fang dynasty, already suspicious of human intentions, saw the warrior species conversion as proof that humanity was systematically destroying galactic culture. They began reaching out to other predatory species, building a coalition of those who refused to abandon their traditional power structures. The humans are not uniting the galaxy, the Fang dynasty leader declared in a speech broadcast across dozens of star systems. They are conquering it through psychological manipulation. They want to make us all weak and dependent on their false empathy. As human diplomatic teams worked frantically to heal ancient conflicts across the galaxy, a new conflict was building. Species that had never been allies were joining together in opposition to human influence. The very success of humanity's peaceful approach was creating its own resistance. With 5 years left before the Devourers' arrival, the galaxy was more divided than ever. Half the species were learning to cooperate in ways they never thought possible. The other half were preparing to fight both the cosmic threat and the humans who claimed to be trying to save them. Bo and Jangmi looked up at the stars from their ship and wondered if they were healing the galaxy or tearing it apart. The answer would determine whether conscious life survived the coming darkness. The Devourer ships emerged from dark space like nightmares made real. They were vast structures that seemed to bend light around them, creating holes in the visible universe where they passed. Each one was the size of a small moon, covered in appendages that reached out across impossible distances to drain energy from anything they touched. As the ancient enemy approached, the galaxy's response was everything the Void Consortium had predicted. Half the species had learned to work together through human diplomatic efforts, creating unprecedented cooperation based on genuine understanding. The other half had united in opposition to human influence, forming military alliances based on traditional power structures and mutual fear. The galaxy was divided not just in strategy, but in fundamental philosophy. One side believed that unity through empathy could protect them. The other side insisted that only strength and dominance would survive. Ambassador Kong Wu, now in his 80s but still clear-minded, stood in the Federation Council chamber as emergency reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The first Devourer scout ships had reached the outer systems, and the results were exactly what the historical data had predicted. The Fang Dynasty fleet engaged the lead Devourer ship. General Beek Su reported grimly. Initial weapons fire seemed effective, but within minutes the enemy vessel began growing larger. By the end of the battle, it had absorbed the energy from the entire Fang Dynasty task force and tripled in size. Similar reports came from other systems where traditional military responses had been attempted. Every weapon fired at the Devourers made them stronger. Every aggressive action fed their power. The galaxy's natural instinct to fight back was giving their enemies exactly what they needed to grow. But in systems where human, diplomatic teams had successfully created genuine cooperation, something different was happening. The Devourers seemed to have difficulty detecting these worlds. Their feeding appendages passed over cooperative civilizations as if they weren't there. The mathematics are clear, Dr. Limha reported from her monitoring station. The can sense and feed on conflict-based consciousness patterns from vast distances, but minds that are genuinely unified in cooperative purpose seem to be nearly invisible to them. The revelation should have been cause for celebration, but it came too late for much of the galaxy. The Fang Dynasty's attack had alerted to the galaxy's location and awakened their full feeding response. Massive Devourer fleets were now pouring in from intergalactic space, drawn by the conflict energy generated by the galaxy's divided response. Worse, the Fang Dynasty's failure only made them more determined to fight. Their leader, Supreme Fang Destroyer, broadcast a message across all their allied systems. The human approach has failed, he declared. Their peaceful worlds are being ignored only because they're too weak to be worth consuming. When the finish with the strong systems, they'll return for the helpless cooperation worlds. Only by becoming stronger than our enemies can we hope to survive. The message sparked a cascade of aggressive responses across the galaxy. Species that had been wavering between cooperation and conflict chose to fight. Military fleets assembled. In every system, weapons capable of destroying stars were powered up and aimed at the approaching Devourer armadas. Each act of aggression made the situation worse. The Devourers grew larger and more numerous with every battle. What had begun as a manageable threat was becoming an unstoppable wave of destruction that fed on the galaxy's own attempts to defend itself. In the midst of this chaos, Ambassador Kong Wu made a decision that would either save the galaxy or destroy what little hope remained. He sent a message directly to Supreme Fang Destroyer, not through official channels but as a personal communication from one elderly leader to another. The message was simple and unprecedented. I forgive you, Kong Wu said. I forgive your attack on our diplomatic vessels. I forgive your rejection of our peaceful approach. I forgive your fear of change and your desperate attempt to hold on to the only way of life your people have ever known. You were trying to protect your species in the only way you understood. I respect that, even though I believe there's a better way. The message was broadcast on all frequencies, ensuring that every species in the galaxy heard it. The response was immediate and dramatic. Some species were outraged. How could the humans forgive the very people who had betrayed their efforts and possibly doomed the galaxy? Others were confused. Forgiveness in the face of such betrayal seemed either incredibly wise or incredibly foolish. But the Fang Dynasty themselves were stunned into silence. In their entire history, no enemy had ever responded to aggression with forgiveness. Their culture was based on the assumption that strength demanded respect and weakness invited attack. Forgiveness broke all their understanding of how power relationships worked. Supreme Fang Destroyer requested a private meeting with Kong Wu, something that would have been unthinkable just days before. They met on a neutral station in the space between their territories, while Devourer ships consumed entire solar systems in the distance. Why? Was all the Fang Dynasty leader could ask. He was a massive creature covered in scales like black metal, with claws that could cut through starship armor. But his voice carried genuine confusion rather than threat. Because hatred feeds our enemies, Kong Wu replied simply. Because your people are afraid, and fear makes everyone do desperate things. Because underneath all the aggression and competition, you're trying to protect something you love, just like we are. You speak as if you understand us, Supreme Fang Destroyer said, but your species has never known the struggle for survival that forged us. You've never had to fight for every meal, every territory, every breath. You're right, Kong Wu admitted, but I understand what it feels like to love something so much that you'd do anything to protect it. That's universal, regardless of species or biology. The conversation lasted for hours. For the first time, Supreme Fang Destroyer found himself explaining not just what his people did, but why they did it. The Fang Dynasty's aggression came from millions of years of evolution on a world where everything was a predator. Their dominance hierarchies were survival strategies that had kept their species alive when cooperation meant death. We've never known safety, he admitted finally. Every Fang Dynasty child learns that showing weakness means being consumed by stronger predators. Cooperation in our history meant joining with someone just long enough to kill a common enemy, then turning on your ally before they could betray you first. That must be exhausting, Kong Wu said gently. Always having to be strong, always having to fight, never being able to trust anyone completely. The simple expression of empathy broke something inside the Fang Dynasty leader. For the first time in his life, someone had looked at his species' behavior and seen not evil or cruelty, but pain and fear. What if there was another way? Kong Wu asked. What if your people could be strong without having to destroy others? What if you could protect what you love through building rather than conquering? The idea seemed impossible, but Supreme Fang Destroyer found himself wanting to believe it. As they talked, other species leaders began requesting similar conversations. With human diplomats, the act of forgiveness had triggered something unexpected across the galaxy. Species that had been manipulated into supporting the Fang Dynasty began to question their choices. If the humans could forgive their betrayers, maybe cooperation really was possible. If strength could be expressed through protection rather than domination, maybe there were alternatives to endless conflict. Within weeks, the coalition opposing human influence began to crumble. Not through military defeat or political pressure, but through the simple recognition that they had been offered something they had never experienced before: unconditional acceptance. The transformation wasn't immediate or complete. Centuries of mistrust and competition couldn't be erased overnight. But species after species began reaching out to human diplomatic teams, asking not for treaties or alliances, but for help understanding this new way of relating to others. The Fang dynasty became the most surprising converts. Supreme Fang Destroyer announced that his people would redirect their warrior instincts toward protecting other species rather than conquering them. Their natural aggression became a shield for the vulnerable rather than a sword against the weak. "We are still predators," he declared to his people, "but now we hunt those who would harm the innocent, rather than the innocent themselves." As word of the galaxy's growing unity spread, something remarkable began happening to the Devourer invasion. The massive ships that had been growing larger with each battle began to slow and weaken, their feeding appendages designed to drain conflict energy from civilizations at war, found less and less nourishment. Dr. Kim So monitored the change from her research station, watching in amazement as her instruments detected shifts in the fundamental energy patterns of galactic civilization. "The consciousness resonance is stabilizing," she reported. "For the first time in recorded history, we're seeing genuine large-scale cooperation rather than cooperation based on mutual fear." The Devourers, starved of the conflict energy they needed to maintain their massive forms, began to shrink. Their ships became smaller and more vulnerable. More importantly, they seemed confused by what they were encountering. For millions of years, the Devourers had fed on galaxies, torn apart by war and competition. They had evolved specifically to consume civilizations that responded to threat with aggression and fear. But they had no strategy for dealing with consciousness that chose understanding over conflict. The final confrontation came not as a massive space battle, but as something closer to a rescue mission. The Devourer ships, now reduced to a fraction of their original size, drifted helplessly in the outer systems of the galaxy. Their crews were dying as their feeding mechanisms failed. Ambassador Song Jun, now the Federation's chief xenologist, led a joint mission to make contact with the weakened Devourers. What they found challenged every assumption about the ancient enemy. The Devourers weren't evil in any conventional sense. They were refugees from a galaxy that had destroyed itself through eternal warfare. Millions of years ago, they had evolved beyond the need for physical form, existing as pure consciousness that fed on the energy patterns of organized thought. But their home galaxy had been so consumed by conflict that it had literally torn itself apart. The Devourers had been forced to become nomadic, traveling between galaxies and feeding on whatever consciousness they could find. The competitive, war-torn civilizations they encountered reinforced their belief that conflict was the natural state of all intelligent life. "We thought consciousness meant competition," the Devourer spokesperson communicated through quantum fluctuations. "In every galaxy we have visited, thinking beings fight each other for resources, territory, and dominance. We assumed this was the universal pattern. It doesn't have to be," Song Jun replied. "Consciousness can also choose cooperation, understanding, and mutual support. We can show you how." The offer of rehabilitation rather than destruction stunned the Devourers. In their millions of years of existence, no species had ever offered them an alternative to their nomadic feeding lifestyle. Working together, the galaxy's united species developed new forms of consciousness energy that could nourish the Devourers without requiring conflict. The process involved meditation techniques from peaceful species, reality engineering from warrior cultures, and mathematical frameworks from scientific civilizations. The result was a new form of galactic consciousness, one that generated enough positive energy to support both the existing species and their former enemies. The Devourers settled in the outer regions of the galaxy, becoming guardians rather than destroyers, protecting the unified civilization from other cosmic threats. Years passed, and the transformation continued. Children from dozens of species learned together in integrated schools, playing games that would have been impossible when their parents were enemies. Former warrior cultures channeled their competitive instincts into art, exploration, and the protection of the vulnerable. The galaxy that had once been divided into thousands of competing factions became something unprecedented. A truly cooperative civilization that spanned multiple star systems and included every known form of consciousness. Ambassador Kong Wu lived to see his 100th birthday, celebrated on worlds he had never visited by species he had helped unite. At the ceremony, representatives from across the galaxy spoke about the diplomatic revolution that had saved them all. "The humans taught us that strength doesn't require dominance," Supreme Fang Destroyer said, his once fearsome voice now warm with gratitude. "That understanding is more powerful than conquest. That love is the ultimate expression of intelligence." The Crystal Conclave delegates' gemstone form glowed with patterns of joy. They showed us that diversity makes us stronger rather than weaker, that our differences are sources of wisdom rather than reasons for conflict. Even the reformed Devourers participated in the celebration, their quantum communications adding harmonic frequencies to the cosmic choir of voices, expressing gratitude for humanity's gift to the galaxy. As Kang Wu looked out at the assembled representatives, he smiled at how far they had all come. The galaxy that had once seemed doomed by its own divisions had become a beacon of hope that would inspire civilizations in distant galaxies for millions of years to come. "We didn't save the galaxy by being stronger or smarter than our enemies," he said in his acceptance speech. "We saved it by recognizing that there are no enemies, only beings who haven't yet learned how to be friends." The celebration lasted for days, with species sharing their music, art, food, and stories in a festival of unity that could be seen from neighboring galaxies. And at the center of it all was the simple recognition that consciousness, at its best, chooses love over fear, understanding over judgment, and cooperation over competition. The human gift to the galaxy wasn't technology or military might. It was the demonstration that empathy, genuine care for others, and the willingness to see beyond surface differences could overcome any challenge, even cosmic ones. As the festival ended and representatives returned to their homeworlds, they carried with them a new understanding of what civilization could become. The age of competition was over. The age of cooperation had begun. And in the vast spaces between galaxies, other civilizations detected the unique energy signature of the unified galaxy and began to wonder if such cooperation might be possible for them as well. The diplomatic revolution was spreading beyond its birthplace, carrying humanity's greatest gift to consciousness everywhere, the knowledge that love is stronger than fear, an understanding more powerful than any weapon ever conceived.